What's up, everybody? Welcome to the One Truth Ministries podcast. It's Eric, and with me are my awesome co-host Elias, Mr. Ron D. Aragon Jr. What's up, guys?
What's going on, Eric?
Hey, how's it going?
Yes, but before we start, Mr. Elias has to plug a event that One Truth Ministries is collaborating on. Go ahead, Elias. Let them know what's up.
All right, so check it out. So, primeramente le queremos invitar a todos los que nos están escuchando. Este entrante octubre 1, 2 y también el tercero a terminar va a estar con nosotros el pastor Roman Truchak y vamos a tener un evento en la iglesia de Vallejo, iglesia hispana de Vallejo, y va a ser en el 2025 Sonoma Boulevard. Todos están invitados, va a ser desde el viernes, va a comenzar a las 6:30 y a todos los pastores, cada pastor que nos está escuchando o líderes que están escuchando, el sábado a las 12 del día a 1:30 vamos a tener un tiempo especial para los pastores, para que vengan, tengan compañerismo y se unan. Después del compañerismo con pastores, vamos a abrir las puertas para terminar el evento de que se titula Unirse. Entonces, octubre 1, octubre 2, octubre 3 va a ser para la iglesia local, pero si hay pastores aquí, no vamos a decirles a las ovejas que vengan el 3. Pero si tienen tiempo y tienen oportunidad de estar con nosotros, a las 12 del día, octubre 3, va a ser un tiempo de gran bendición con Pastor Roman. Vamos a tener invitados especiales para el grupo de alabanza. All right, so that's it. We'll see you October 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. It's going to be a fellowship that is called Merge with Pastor Roman Truchak.
Not only that, but I'm going to give you guys a quick minute so that way you guys can scan the QR code. I don't know on which side it is. It's right there, right? I'm going to give you guys a minute so that way you guys can scan the QR code. And if you're a pastor or a leader, you can quickly RSVP because we are having a luncheon. So make sure that you guys RSVP so you can have your spot reserved. So,
yeah. Y algo que también se me olvidó, también como dice Eric, cada pastor que quiere y está interesado de asistir o tiene líderes que quisieran asistir al almuerzo de pastores y líderes, aquí abajo en este programa, pues usted puede ver allí, puede poner su teléfono y escanear este código para llevarlo al lugar donde tiene que hacer sus reservaciones, o si no, puede hacer la reservación en Iglesia Hispana de Vallejo.org. Okay. All right. So that's
alrighty,
it.
guys. So make sure, again, mark your calendars. Don't forget.
It's going to be exciting. I haven't seen Roman in a while. Pastor Roman.
Right. Yeah. It's going to be exciting. Good times.
Yeah. But guys, we are in the month where it's important to talk about mental health, and specifically, we're still covering our, biblical view of depression. And guys, again, it's a not to say that it's not a real thing. It is a real thing. We all go through it in some way, shape, or form. But again, it is something that does need to be talked about. And if you know anybody out there that needs prayer, and doesn't need some form of outreach, make sure you contact whoever, tell them you love them and that you're there for them, or feel free to drop that resource right there, Life Outreach International Helpline, and they are not sponsored, also Breakthrough Prayer Line as well. If anybody just doesn't feel comfortable being prayed for in their local church or whatever, they can receive prayer by calling that number right there. Again, not a sponsor as well, but guys.
But what we are sponsoring is if you want to, feel free to reach out to One Truth Ministries and drop a direct message. One of our team members will make sure to reach out and let us know. And we're here also to help out in whatever way, shape, and form that you're going through in this season.
Exactly. Well, again, we're talking about depression. And again, I feel like depression it's such a heavy and wide topic that that I not to say a lot of people don't talk about. So some people do, and there are indeed experts out there in the world that specialize in things like this. But just to kind of as an icebreaker, you guys, have you ever had one of the ever gone through that moment of mental health or just depression in general?
I don't know, Ron. I'll let you go first. Let me see.
Yeah, we get moments. I mean, we all. I think we all get moments of depression. Some people get it harder than others, or worse. And people have different ways of coping with it. But I do believe that we do have moments of it. You know, the enemy tries to attack you in any way that he can. So why not hit you with depression?
Right. Yeah, that's good. For
Yeah.
me personally, I think when I look at depression, and I could even put it as depression mixed in with anxiety,
Mm.
and it's like, and it's for me. I've been a person that's always been strong about anxiety. Growing up in church, you take things to the cross, and just there's really never been a moment that I feel like so heavy burden, and I feel so down, but I felt overwhelmed. And it was recently around December. Ron, I think I reached out to you.
Yeah.
I've never felt this ever in my life. And I'm like, wait a second, I'm not worried about nothing. I don't have all these things, for me to worry about, but I never knew that excess stress with work, just being overworked, whether it is in ministry, at my secular job, it all piled up. And I guess I got in this place of anxiety that I've never knew I ever had. And I thought I thought I was going to be gone. I'm like, what's going on? I got down and prayed. I got to a point that I reached out, and requested prayer. But in my own personal time alone with God at nighttime, when it was the most difficult, I had to get in and just pray things out of like, Lord, I need you. I don't know what's going on with me. I don't know what's wrong with me. I kept waking up. My heartbeat was like accelerated. And it was a time that I really went through it. And thank God, that everything came back to normal. I was able to be triumphant and victorious. But it was a time of reflecting. I'm like, wow, it's something that a lot of people deal with. For me, it took so much work and stress to be able to get to this point, this breaking point that I never thought but now I think it's helped me manage myself and be able to take a step back and knowing that it's okay just to take a little bit of a step back and just gather myself.
Yeah. I think one thing that at least for at least Christians is we're painted as this happy go lucky, kind of, like, oh, well, what do you have to be sad about? Blah 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 blah. You're the kind of people that look at the glass half full, right? You don't look at it as half empty, right? And so I feel like guy, just for anybody who's watching, guys, we're all humans. We all experience some we're still human. We still feel all these human emotions, right? And just because we have the again, not to say just because we have the Lord we don't feel him, right? But or like they're completely gone. It's not like that, right? We're still human, right? But it's just that the Lord has filled us so that way we can turn to him, right? Or we can turn to the scripture to look for guidance, right?
Mm-hmm.
But me and myself, I mean, I'll say, there are times where I have experienced depression, and the best way I can kind of explain it is in my understanding of just how I felt it once was I just felt like have you guys ever just laid in a pool and just kind of just laid there and just kind of floated on the water?
Yeah.
It's that, but for me it was always it was more of a sinking feeling, right? So it's your head is above the surface, right? And that's when you're okay. But then when you start feeling depression, you just and you can't, and again, it's more of that exhausted kind of feeling of just there's nothing you can do except just endlessly fall, right? But yeah, I mean that's the best, or not the best example, but because I mean nobody wants to have depression or anything. But again, for me, that's usually whenever I get into that kind of mental state, that's how I it just feels every night when I sleep, it's just endless falling, and that's because again my mind is racing a million miles a minute and just trying to process everything and just trying to put it all into perspective. So but yeah, that's me. I mean, again, guys, like, again, I know that, there's people out there that, as you said, Elias, and it manifests itself into kind of, physical forms, right? Where, you have anxiety and you start, like you can't breathe or whatever and things like that. But I mean, Elias, you came armed, ready with the word, right? So, let's talk about how the Bible, like, kind of paints a picture of about depression.
Yeah, definitely. And just to touch a little bit about this, vamos a hablar un poquito ahorita de la depresión a la vista bíblica, pero vamos a estar ahorita en español. Sabemos que buscando bastantes lemas que se habla en respecto de la salud mental. Creo que todo lo que yo he recibido, si hay alguien que tal vez tiene más información y lo tiene en español, nos puede contactar aquí a One Truth Ministries para hacer un evento, un podcast directo en español. Pero ahorita todo lo que hemos encontrado ha sido más en inglés, más aquí viviendo en los Estados Unidos y creciendo en un ambiente que habla monolingüe inglés. Pero si hay alguien allí que nos está viendo y tiene un interés de estar con el podcast y tiene información en respecto a salud mental en español, nos puede dar nos puedes mandar un mensaje directo. All right. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and just talk a little bit about a biblical view that I saw that I've noticed. And for me, it's like when I look at David's life, we look at David's life. Here he is, a young man. He was anointed king, but yet he had to wait for a long time until he actually took the throne. So in the process, there was a lot of things that he went through physically, emotionally. And, the Bible doesn't talk about mental health, but it gives us a little bit of glimpse of a breakdown that is so real that even we can identify with. And we're going to go to the book of Psalms, chapter 38, and we're going to read from verses 4 through 7. Psalms chapter 38, verses 4 through 7. Let's look here at some of what David is going through. And the whole chapter, if you're able to read the whole chapter, go ahead and read it. But we're going to just touch on these couple of verses. But the whole chapter really speaks loud and of David's state of being right now. So verse 4 talks about my guilt overwhelms me. It is a burden too heavy to bear. My wounds fester and stink because of my foolish sins. I am bent over and raked with pain. All day long I walk around filled with grief. Look at verse 7. A raging fever burns within me, and my health is broken. So here we see David just going and talking about his state of being. And I'm just gonna go around, and Ron and Eric, let's touch a little bit about this and say, what sort of emotion do we see David express here?
Ron, if you want to go first.
Well, I mean, this is just one of the Psalms that speaks like that. There's many of them.
Yeah.
There's where he tells God, I wish you can give me wings and I could just fly out of here, or even sometimes just take me. You know what I'm saying? Like, let me just end my life and I'll just go with you, so these verses, it speaks deep of the afflictions and how can I say, depressed heart of someone who's, supposedly the man after God's own heart, right?
Mm-hmm.
And let's see, what you read from 38 to
38 verses 4 to 7.
4 through 7.
Yeah.
Well,
I
Go
am
ahead.
troubled and I'm bowed down greatly. I go mourning all the day long. Just that, it just means his head's been down all day, and I go mourning. It's not like good morning. No, it's mourning as in like he's sad.
Mhm.
Mourning is almost a type of depression too.
Yeah.
And so much that he's troubled. It says, "I am bowed down greatly."
Mm.
That feeling of just
Yeah. And there's something that Eric mentioned before we even got on the podcast, something very interesting. And Eric, I know you could touch on it a little bit. That sometimes we get people that tell us like, pick yourself up, or
Right.
shake it off.
Yeah. I mean, like if you're an athlete out there, right, or you do sports, right, you fall on the ground, right, and you're like really hurt, right, you sometimes have that that coach or that one friend that's like, all right, pick yourself up, rub some dirt, and
walk it off.
get back in it. Yeah, walk it off and get back in it, right. And then, while I understand, like, for like maybe the physical, right, it's like, yeah, like, oh, how bad is it? Oh, it's just a cut no bigger than just and it's like, oh yeah, rub some dirt on it, and you're not gonna die, right? They don't gotta amputate the whole thing, right? But I feel like in terms of when talking about depression, like, it's not that easy, because one thing that I feel like, at least for depression, is that I feel like it's all a matter of perspective. Like, somebody from the outside, like, again, from the inside looking out, right, you can say like, oh yeah, like, life is not going the way I want it to, or whatever, right? And but from the outside looking in, somebody can look at that and kind of interpret it as like, what are you talking about? Like, are you kidding me? Like, you have an abundance of whatever, right? You have, oh man, you have like all of the latest and greatest, tech, or, oh, you have so much money, like, what are you talking about? How can you be bummed out about, like, about your life? What are you talking about? So I feel like, with depression, it's kind of like, if you're from the outside looking in, right, you can't really understand, like, what maybe some, like, again, like, the best way I could describe it, right, you could have all the money in the world and be like, you can be still bummed out that, like, oh man, I have $1 million, and I'm still sad because, like, I don't have, I have a house, I have this, and I have this, and I have this, and I have this, right? But then, like, somebody could, have all that money and still feel like, like, well, I mean, I may have $1 million, but, like, I don't have too many friends,
Yeah.
or, I have $1 million, but, like, I still can't, like, find a relationship or whatever, you know what I mean? So I feel like with everything about depression, it's all a matter of perspective, right? Because, again, someone looking from the outside in can be like, "What are you talking about? You have a great life, right?" But then someone from that was loud. Someone from the outside looking in, or from the inside looking out, what I mean, like, again, you're not that person. You can't process their feelings and how they're processing certain emotions and things like that, So I feel like, again, it's just with depression, it's a matter of perspective, right? Put yourself in that other person's shoes, and vice versa, right? Because, again, if you're always on the inside looking outward, right? Like, if you switch places, right, you can look at it and say like, wow, you know what, I'm like really blessed, I have a great job, I have a great house, right, I have a great, significant other that, is super easy to talk to or whatever, right? So again, you have to learn to sometimes switch places. If you're just stuck in from the inside of the house, right, you can't realize like, oh, I have all these amazing things, I don't have to have a great job that pays for everything, right? So it's just a matter. I feel like with depression, it's kind of a matter of perspective, and you have to change perspective, whether you're, outside looking in or inside looking out. So yeah. But I mean, kind of to go back to the verse here. I mean, this is like the best way when I'm looking at this is like literally like like some of the things that are said just like within verse 4, right? My guilt is overwhelming, like a burden too heavy to bear, right? And I feel like, that's like first of all, just that one verse alone is like the telltale sign of like, you know, like, oh, you know, like the world is bearing down on me, right? And like, or like, oh, my life is bearing down on me. And it's like, you know, or you did something and you just feel so bad. And then plus everything else that's happening to you, right? And it just starts to fester and just starts to, you know, like become too much, and where you're just like, I can't anymore. Like, you know, like I don't want to talk to anyone. I don't like, you know, but like, that's the normal kind of thing that, you know, it's like people don't want to be talked to. Right. And so again, you know, just from that one verse, you know, classics, it feels like classic sign of, you know, kind of like depression as well. Going on, moving further down, I mean, my wounds fester and loathsome because of a sinful folly. I mean, we can look at that as just like, again, whatever actions you did or whatever you think is like, you know, like, oh, like, again, like, I guess you can say like whatever situation you are in life, right, is like, again, kind of like, again, it's just festering, you know, like the best way I can describe it is like when you get angry, right, you know, and you don't want to, you know, pop off on somebody, right, you just bottle it in, and it's the same thing, right, you're just bottling all of your emotions, right, and then eventually it just gets, it's just it becomes a weight on your shoulders, and you're just like, if I don't talk to anybody, like this is just going to keep eating away at me, you know.
And I just want to just those are very good observations, you know, that especially on this chapter. But something I really want to also just circle in and actually get to is that even in that place, David is talking to God.
Mm-hmm.
Even in feeling in the lowest of lows, there is a communication between him and God. And I want to go to verse 21 and how David is about to end this chapter. Verse 21 on chapter 38 of Psalms, it said, "Do not abandon me, O Lord. Do not stand at a distance, my God. Come quickly to help me, O Lord, my Savior." You know, so there's a place that he's putting hope in. There's a place that he is drawing from. You know, it's like, I need you. I know I'm a mess. I know I'm in a place that I feel like this. And he's shared his feelings, but he's like, don't abandon me.
Yeah.
And even in Psalms 121, we see another way that he says, I will lift up my eyes to the hills. And look at that. He says, where does my help come from? You know, he's asking himself, where does my help come from? And his answer comes back on verse 2. He says, my help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth.
Yep.
So there is a place of hope. And we know that God is a God of hope. He is a God to the hopeless. You know, and even no matter where we find ourselves, there is a place of hope. And even in the most traumatic places, you know, because depression and trauma sometimes goes hand in hand. You know, what led me to this place? I remember when I was in seminary in I think it was the Baptist Seminary of the West. You know, they had a Hispanic group there, a Latino group, and the professor at the time asked a question. It was very interesting. And they were like, you always got to identify your mental state. If you're mad, if you're happy, if you're in a place that you feel sad, or you feel like you always got to identify it and be like, why am I feel so angry? Where does that come from? You know, you start, you know, looking around, you know, because sometimes things, you know, they come in, you know, things are just happens, you know, maybe there's things that are going on in my life that maybe I'm not paying attention, but then it's really affecting me mentally and stuff, and putting me in a state of sadness, put me in a state of maybe anger, and I'm lashing out. You know, why is it that we lash out so fast? You know, and I think we need to identify these situations. And even Jesus in Matthew, chapter 14, he got a very traumatic news of his cousin, John the Baptist,
Oh yeah.
that he was killed. And it was a very, very touching moment. And in verse 11, in verse 12 of Matthew 14, later John's disciple came for his body and they buried it. Then they went and told Jesus what had happened. Verse 13, as soon as Jesus heard the news, so these guys arrived, they spoke with Jesus. Hey, we got some bad news. When this happened, we already buried him, everything's done, but as soon as Jesus heard the news, verse 13, look at what he did. He says he left in a boat to a remote area to be alone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's okay. So he had to identify, like, hey, this is very hard for me right now. I need to remove myself. And even though he didn't remove himself too long, because there was a big crowd that found out where he was at, and they went to him and they're like, oh, we want Jesus, we want you to pray for us, or we want to hear you speak. And he had compassion for them. But we see in that moment, though, there was a place of solitude. There's a place that he had to remove himself and, just gather himself. And I think that's very healthy for us as believers, in situations, whether it's depression, whether it's mental state, whether it is a traumatic situation, to remove ourselves and just be alone. And just like David, don't abandon me, Lord. I need you. You're my help. My help comes from you. So those are things, that I just wanted to touch on right now. And I don't know if you guys got any questions, or we can just go on and move on to maybe a different area of mental health.
Well, I think also, again, is that like, if you, again, I understand where you were saying, in the sense of like, we have to sometimes, when we get to that state, right, we have to remove ourselves and kind of be alone with, our Heavenly Father and everything like that. But I think also, I don't know, again, let me ask, like, if you guys agree, do you think that, like, also having that kind of physical, like, presence with at least one person that you trust, like, it doesn't matter, like, it doesn't have to be your pastor, it doesn't have, it's just like, your best friend or whatever, right? Just having that presence and just having that conversation of talking it out, like, hey, like, like, I'm feeling, like the world is, like, my world is crashing down around me, right? Like, Ron, like, let's just, like, go and, just, go get some donuts and, just chat, right? Or, like, oh, let's go get some, tacos, and, like, just go somewhere else. And like, I just want to talk with, I just need somebody, I just need an ear to listen to me right now. And like, like, I've always sometimes, or not always, but I've sometimes been that ear for that person. And for them, like, just for me, extending the olive branch is enough. You know what I mean? Like,
that reminds me of a verse in the Bible too. And I gotta remember, but I know it's clear, where it says, confess one to another that you will be healed.
Mm.
And that part gets to me, where it says you will be healed.
Mm-hmm.
Because we confess to God, and that's important. But confess one to another so you can be healed. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
So it's good. It's good to talk. Yeah, have your moment. Be by yourself. Cry it out. Do whatever you can, but don't stay in that. That. That's the thing. That's where the enemy tries to trick you and tries to keep you by yourself. When you're by yourself, then that's not when it's good.
Right.
So that's why I believe that verse. It's not just about sins, but confess to one another so you can be healed. I mean, that's deep to me. I think a physical healing and a mental healing happens when you do that.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, like, not to throw in everybody's people's business out there, but like, I feel like, again, sometimes it helps just to have that one person that you can trust. Again, it doesn't matter who it is, right? It could be your dog. It doesn't even have to be the same species, for Christ's sakes. But like, just having that one person just to talk it out to, you know what I mean? And like, I feel like just the weight of the world, and just like the amount of actual like physical relief you feel, like, you know, just like talking it out with someone, or again your dog, it doesn't even matter, you know what I mean, but just getting it out of your system, like to some degree, like I feel like you're just like you feel so much better afterwards.
Yeah, it's important to have an accountability person,
Mhm.
you know, and
Now,
like I said, it's not just
yeah.
because of you know accountability, as in, you know, like you're going out and, you know, you can't be alone with a girl or something. No, but it's good to have someone accountable to, who you can talk to every day.
All right.
You know?
So now last week they spoke about, you know, youth ministry, you know, young people with going through mental health and depression. And I know this week we're gonna just try to, well, we're gonna be a little bit more broad, but I think it's important, you know, even with the realm of mental health, uh, for men, for guys, for young men, you know, Latinos, community, you know, have you guys ever heard of maybe people talk about, you know, stigmas or that is around mental health, and maybe even for men or guys, sometimes we're taught, and you know, to bottle our emotions, you know what I mean? We're taught to, like, you know, you got to be tough, you know what I mean? You know, like, man up, you know, kind of attitude, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the more common one that I've heard, is always like, you know, you got to bottle your emotions, right? And like, you know, you break a finger, you're just,
Yeah.
doesn't hurt, you know what I mean? So like those are the kind of the common stigmas that I've heard, you know, all my life, you know. But again, you know, every so often, you know, like you do have to just kind of like, you know, open the jar a little bit, and let a little bit out, you know, whether it's, you know, in the however you want to do it, you know what I mean, like, you know, whether it's just like having your moment with God and just sitting there and being like, Lord, like, you know, pray, just like deep, you know, deep in prayer, you know. And then again, I feel like again, or just having that one talk just between you and God, and just getting it out into the open air, you know. I feel like that, I think, yeah, like for a lot of men, it's always just like been like, you know, like, don't talk to nobody about your problems. The world doesn't care about your problems.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's always been that kind of thing, you know. But what about you guys? I mean, you guys grew up in a much different generation. You know, I'm assuming like I'm assuming, I don't know. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. Is it kind of, it's always been that for you guys as well? Like that's where it trickled down from, right?
Uh, for me, I mean, different because I was raised by all women,
Mm,
so it's completely different.
mm,
But society in itself, yeah, like outside of the house, like, yeah, you got to be tough. You can't, you know, don't be a wimp, or what's the wrong word to use? Don't be a sissy,
right.
you know. And you get that all the time too.
Yeah. Or like, again, if you, again, just the smallest thing, and you know, someone just sees one teardrop and they're like, "You crying? You
Yeah.
crying?" And you're just like, you know. Or and I kind of, speaking to the more Hispanic side, I feel like it's always been like, you better have a reason to cry kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's always been that. Not to hate on my people, just FYI, just because I don't want nobody to come and, you know what I mean, to come and get me. Just saying, but you know, it's always been that. It's like, you know, you better have a reason to cry. That's again, kind of just growing up in it. What about you guys? Has it always been that too?
Growing up for me, I think I didn't really experience that much. You know, my dad, I think, just being a fearful man of God, you know, and the way that he really loved his family and stuff. So it wasn't like hardcore. You know, I've heard other stories, you know, that the father or the parent, you know, like, just like, you got to show your son, you know, how to be a man, and which he did. He did have in his ways, you know, but not to an extreme. I will say that, you know, that he will tell me to, like, not, you know, show emotions. You know, I think I grew up with two sisters and my mother, so you know, it was There was only two guys, in the house, overrun, by a group of girls. So it's like,
Right.
growing up, I was outnumbered.
Right, but you always stick with your dad. It's like, you want to go to a baseball game? Yeah, all right.
Yeah. I went to baseball games with him.
You know what I mean?
Secret, and maybe the secret will be out here. He showed me how to drive stick shift before he showed Elgin.
Gangster, Elgin. What?
And then I showed Elgin. Oh yeah.
He took away her firstborn rights.
I took away her firstborn rights. Sorry, Elgin. I know you're watching from Nicaragua, but we love you.
Jacobo.
But yeah, I mean, again, like, I feel like for at least to society, it's always been that, and like, like you couldn't show. Elgin says in the chat, yes, he did. Oh boy, but
so what do you do? So what do you do when you're out in Nicaragua? I watch One Truth Ministries podcast.
Yeah, there you go. Never missed an episode. But yeah, I mean, so like, I feel like, I don't know. I feel like with depression, it's such a broad topic, and I feel like it's such a broad topic, and there's so many perspectives on it, in the sense of like, as again, guys, we're always taught, don't show a single ounce of emotion, and then people wonder.
I mean, that's why when you go visit churches, you see it's the women that cry and like are more. Not saying that we're not in the presence of God, but you see them; they're more susceptible to accepting it than a guy would.
Mm.
You see the women there on the floor and praying and, oh, thank you, Jesus. And then the guys are like,
Amen, gloria a Dios.
Yeah. So, so that does even affect the way we worship.
I was going to say, do you think it also affects how, like, we receive the word, if that makes sense, right? Like, because, like, I feel like, when you're, like, if you didn't grow up in the church, right, it's like, you're more you're more closed off to, when you start going to a church and, start, your journey as a Christian, right? You're just like, okay, like, I'm going to remain closed, and just be here and do my thing, right? And then, it isn't until like you have that, I call it your God moment, right? You know what I mean? Where you not to say that everybody experiences the supernatural or whatever, but you have that moment of that epiphany, right? Of just like, like, oh, like, let me open up a little bit, and like, let me actually legitimately give my heart to God, and things like that. So, but do you think that it affects us like in the early stages of like, our walk with Christ?
Yeah, I know. You noticed that, like, even like I said, the difference between the men and the women. When you see the women's and they have their events, it's like it's packed, But when the men have an event, you have to like drag. It's almost like pulling teeth to bring them to the event. Yeah. Unless it's something that they like, like, it's because we're built different too,
Right.
Like, we like to work with our hands. We like to build stuff or do something, and I notice when you do that at the church, like you tell them, oh, it's the day to fix stuff, they'll all show up. But if it's just like we have a special guest preacher or something, the wives will come without a problem, and the husbands that are like I said, it's pulling teeth,
Yeah. Well, speaking of also pulling teeth, like, we're gonna quickly plug this phone number, but I feel like, I mean, again, Ron, you kind of being a pastor, do you feel like because you're on this pedestal, right? You are like, not to say the standard, but for example, like, if anybody sees something's wrong with you, like, immediately, like, kind of like there's a break in the chain of command, if that makes sense, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If that's the best way I can describe it, right?
Yeah,
it's like, like Pastor Ron's depressed. Oh, like, like, what does that say about my spiritual life?
See, and I'm glad you brought that up, because ministers and pastors, like, if you notice, remember there was a while where there was pastors that were like just committing suicide.
I don't remember that.
Yeah,
there's a lot of ministry burnout.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'm glad you brought that up because it's true. You can't allow that to happen. You don't, even if they try to put you on the pedestal, don't sit on it. You know
Right.
what I'm saying? Because first of all, as a minister or as a pastor, we're not like higher than anybody. We're just chosen by God to lead the people. And like it says in Ephesians, the fivefold ministries are there just to perfect the saints, you know?
Mm.
So I think the best thing we can do is lead by example. Yeah, I got depression, but you know what? I'm not gonna let it get to me.
Mm.
You know?
You know, and it's now that we're moving into a ministerial part, you know, it's really uh you know, churchpastor.com has a study that identified that up to 70% of pastors battle with some form of depression. And it's because 97% of pastors, they've dealt with betrayal, falsely accused, or
Yep.
hurt by their trusted friends. So imagine being in this place, you know, that you're supposed to care for the people, and some pastors even, and we studied this even in our in the nonprofit that I work in. We talk about what is it, compassion? When you have compassion and you have so much compassion, you could burn out to compassion burnout
Mm-hmm.
because you're just hearing people out. You want to help people out. You're just going in, you know, like making sure that they're okay, you know, and your whole life is built on helping others.
But you
But
forget to help
you
yourself.
forget, you know, it just becomes a burden on you. You know what I mean? It's like, and now who's there for you? You know,
Mm.
so that's why I think it's important for ministers to really take that place and, you know, really take some time, you know, and I love when I see leaders, you know, taking the role, you know, and helping out their pastors or taking care of their pastors. You know what I mean? When something's like, no, you go and hang out with your family. We got this here. The church is gonna go, you know, or they give them a whole month off. You know, it's like it's important. You know what I mean? They really need that support.
Yeah. And so, with that being said, guys, if you guys know any pastors or any leaders as well that, you know, like maybe they don't really, you know, again, not to say that you know you're not extending the olive branch, but again, you know, maybe there's a leader, or there's a pastor watching right now on the live stream, right? You know, guys, again, feel free to, you know, get the help you need as well, because I mean, again, the way I view it is that, again, like, you know, it's exactly as you said, right? You know, yes, you're committed to helping people, right? You know, and helping them, right? But don't forget, like, it's pretty much, not to say like pointless, like, again, you want to, if you want to keep helping people, right, make sure that you also are helped as well. You know what I mean? Just so then that way you're not shouldering, you know, all of this, you know, emotional weight as well, you know, because again, you're human. We all have our own problems, we all have our own situations in life. So again, just, you know, and by the way, just FYI, you know, Pastoral Caroline is not a sponsor as well. None of the phone numbers that we put up are sponsoring the podcast. We just want to get the information out there so that way you, the people, can utilize it, you know, whether it's you feel like you don't have someone to talk to, or you don't have someone to pray for you, or whatever. You know, these are just resources for you, so you guys can utilize them to whatever you need. You know what you know who knows you better than you. So just throwing it out there. But I mean, yeah, again, I feel like a lot of it is just, again, as you said, like, you know, you're like, yes, I want to help people. Yes. But we always, again, I'm one of those people that sometimes forgets, take a little bit of time, you know, work on myself, and then, you know, then I can be a better use to help others.
And like Ron said, you know, have that accountability person or somebody that's trustworthy, that even in ministry, you know, like we can never get to a point that we don't have somebody to speak to that is trustworthy. Whether it could be somebody that's a good friend. Maybe you guys were in seminary together. Maybe you guys grew up together. Maybe you guys are pastoring somewhere, maybe not in the same church or in the same region, but different areas, but you still have that connection and somebody that can help you out, and you could just they could be there hearing you out and giving you sound advice.
Yeah. And also don't be afraid to extend the olive branch as well to, anybody that you may notice has like, is being kind of distant or, showing any kind of signs of depression, because again, like you never know what's someone's situation, and just for them to have the ear just to just to talk to, or just to be that person to talk to, it'll help them out,
Yeah.
because yeah,
And,
there are multiple situations where I've been in that, and it's just like, yo, dog, I just need someone to talk to. And I'm like, all right, let's go get a burrito and we'll just chat, and that's it.
and even this is more for leaders or even anybody that's watching that's not in ministry, but you have a pastor or leadership in ministries, and you just want to honor them. There's actually camps in the Bay Area or locally here in Northern California that are offering pastors to stay overnight, in their own cabins, so they can just go and just be in a place of like of just to recharge and be there. So whether you're a senior pastor, youth pastor, children's pastor, worship pastor, they welcome you to stay at one of their lodgings. And one of them actually, and it's like Eric said, we're not plugging them in. They're not sponsoring us, but it's just good resources to have. One is Jennings Park. And if you're familiar with Jennings Park, it's a Christian camp, and they are here in Northern California. And if you're a leader and you want to find out more information about it, maybe you want to send your pastors on a vacation, you know what I mean? So they could just recharge or regroup. Hey, do it. Just look it up and make sure you let's love on our pastors. Let's honor
just love in general, I think.
Yeah.
Just love, and just love in general, just like again, like and also just again, just kind of as a thing, just like like you just got to destigmatize like what depression, like everything around depression, right? Like if someone's depressed, it's not that there's something mentally wrong with them, right? It's or like anything like that, like just like it's just that they're going through a rough patch, and again, you can't really fully understand what they're going through, but again, just being there for them is it's enough, you know what I mean? And whether or not they start to chat you up about what it is that they're going through, just again, for them, all they just need to hear is like, hey, yo, I'm here if you want to talk, feel free to text me, hit me up, right? And obviously, yeah,
I can get a new hashtag now.
Right, there you go.
Hashtag send me to Tahiti.
Anybody want to sponsor Pastor Ron?
Oh my God,
Tahiti, make sure you use the hashtag.
Please, please don't. Oh man.
Joking, but that does sound nice. Jennings Park, somewhere like that in the woods.
Yeah.
It's just good to talk. It's just good to, my advice to leaders is take off the pastor robe, take off the leadership role at that moment, and just be in the front of the presence of God and someone that you need to talk to, and just let them know how you feel.
Yeah. Or even, and then again, just even working further down, right? If you're a leader, right, take off the leader role and just be like, for your youth out there, right? Just be like, hey, here's here's my phone number or whatever, right? Or hit me, let me know, if you guys want to talk. That's it. That's all it needs to be, right? Yeah. Bring yourself down to whatever level, of whoever you're gonna help, is basically kind of what Ron is saying. Don't be like, I'm the pastor,
Yeah.
Here's what the Bible says about depression. It's like, humble thyself a little bit, and No,
and vice versa too. As a pastor, like if you're going through stuff, take off that pastor role, and really just be ministered to. Allow someone else to minister to you. Because we need that too. We're so busy praying and ministering to that we forget that we need to be refreshed also.
Yep.
And not to be afraid. I know some pastors are like, well, I don't allow anyone to pray for me. Well, you're missing out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And again, it's crazy because again, like kind of going back to what Pastor Paul, if you guys remember the podcast that we did with about talking about hip hop in church, right? His little son, man, just like barely 5 years old, right, is praying over people, but the little dude knows how to pray, and sometimes it's just that the simple action of a child praying over an adult that you're just like, man, like the spirit is working through a 5-year-old. It doesn't even this is again, it's something that transcends age, race, whatever it is, right? Whatever barriers you put in your head of like, oh, whatever, right? Like, nobody can pray for me because I'm older and blah blah blah, right? Like, it's something that transcends that, right? It can be something as small as a 5-year-old child, right, praying over you, and just hearing the words of a 5-year-old, right? It's very, again, not very innocent and very sincere. That's what does it, and you're just like, man, you know what? Like, thank you, little brother. So I'm just saying, yeah, it's, again, you're right, Ron. It is something that does it's just the title, and any other barrier that's stopping that you've set up for yourself, just like let it go and just drop it and just just feel the spirit. But I mean, guys, is there anything else that you guys want to touch upon, or
I think there's a lot, and like I said, if there's anybody in here that's maybe listens to this and maybe has a little bit of a take, in Spanish, or has a recommendation, we're willing to just send this our way, DM us, let us know, and we could do a podcast all in Spanish with a little mental health. And of course, it will have to be a biblical stance as well, and just to be able to talk and be able to hear all the important things that we as a church, as leaders, as pastors need to do. And I think that's basically it. I don't know, Ron, you want to chime in on something?
Well, another thing too is don't be afraid, even if you need professional help.
Mm-hmm.
We have the Bible, we have prayer, and we know God takes care of everything, but there's nothing wrong for looking for professional help either,
Right.
And again, there are people that just specialize in that, and again, and while it may not be from a biblical standpoint, right,
well, as long as you know where you stand with God,
right, but again, it does help to have that professional to kind of put things into kind of a different perspective, or it's just even better. It's just better to have that different perspective.
And I know people are afraid of that. Oh, professional. Does it mean I'm nuts? No, it doesn't mean you're nuts.
It means you're human.
Yeah, it just means you need that professional help, that someone can God gave that person that talent and that gift to be able to help you through what you're going through.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And again, guys, it's like, we're not saying, like, again, professional help is bad and that it's wrong for you to look for it. We're not saying that, but just having that third perspective does help a lot.
Yeah.
Seeking professional help.
Yeah, not just with depression, but also, marriage counseling or whatever you're going through, just.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, but never stop praying. Of course, that's
for
always,
sure. For sure. And just remember, guys, that it's God's will, right? Not to say that you'll never get out of it, right? But more of like it'll the answer to what is kind of making you stumble will be revealed to you in His time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you just have to make sure that you have an open heart to receive it, right? Because it could, again, just be the small fact that your son, daughter, whoever it is, just says like, "Hey, mom, like, do you want me to pray for you?" Maybe that's it, and then it's just like, have an open heart and be like, "Yes, absolutely," or whatever it is. Amen. But yep, with that, guys, I mean, we're coming close to the end of the podcast, but before we go, we just have to plug this in one more time. Make sure that you show up to that event, October 2nd. We'll have Roman Trachuk here. And again, if you guys want, you guys can go to our Facebook, facebook.com /One Truth Ministries. You can also go to our IG and you can find us there, and you can find the flyer, and then just use another phone or use whatever to scan the little QR code, so that way you can respond to the you can RSVP for the pastor and leaders luncheon. And again, remember, just October 1st and 2nd, just have those dates open on your calendar and come through. We'll have a good time. And yeah.
Now you got to give me your radio voice to promote that.
Please don't.
Come on, Eric.
Man.
We need that radio voice.
All right, radio voice. You want me to do it in my radio voice? Here we go. Okay, hang on.
It's like it gotta be like a promo, though. You know what I mean? Like when the promo comes out.
Okay, here we go. Hey, you guys, make sure that you come out October 2nd and 1st for our Merge event, which is a collaboration between One Truth Ministries and Rebirth IHDV. Guys, make sure that you show up and you RSVP. Make sure you scan the QR code down there, right at the bottom in the corner. So then that way you can RSVP to our lunch and you can have your plate saved. That way you can also talk with Roman and all the other leaders that are going to be at the event, and you can kind of exchange notes or whatever you want to do, or just to network. So make sure October 1st and 2nd, we'll start October 1st at 6:30, and October 2nd, we start at 4:30. So hope to see you guys there in Vallejo. There you go.
You go.
Is there any hints on what the lunch is going to be?
No.
It will be a question for Brother Joe. But
yes, if you have any more questions, hit us up, or again, you can hit up the IHDV website. Elias, if you want to hit them with that IHDV website.
Yes, so that is Iglesia Hispana de Vallejo.org. I don't know if we could write that in the chat somewhere. Iglesia Hispana de Vallejo.
Oh, I'll write it in the chat again.
Yeah.
Let me just find the website. But again, yeah. So go check out the website, and then there you have all the information of how to get there, all that kind of good jazz. Thank you guys so much for tuning in every single week. We love you guys. You guys are awesome. And remember to be back here Wednesday at 8 p.m. for another episode of the podcast.
Hey, thank you guys for inviting me with you guys tonight. This is very important.
It's always a fun time when we have you on here, Ron.
Right?
It's never a fun
Ron, man. You're like a unofficial official, like one of the podcast hosts.
Yep. All righty. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. We love you. Peace out.
Bye, everybody.
God bless y'all.